There we are. There's the live button.
Mhm.
Okay, welcome everyone. This is episode 31 of the Nonprofit Problem Solver podcast. Our question today is, how does nonprofit strategy undermine financial security? With us to speak about that very topic is Maseta Dorley. How are you?
I am great, Kev. Thank you so much for having me today.
Oh,
Looking
I'm
forward
excited
to
for
it.
this conversation. I've been looking
Yeah.
forward to it since we set the title. So let me just explain to folks how this happens. We're recording live on the Yacht.me virtual events platform. They're a proud sponsor of the Nonprofit Problem Solver podcast, as is PodPro Audio, which is the producer which makes professional podcasting easy. And we are raising money for whom today, Masita?
Well, we are raising money for Turning Point 180 for an organization I have been volunteering with proudly. Located in North Carolina for the past 6 years. It was started by a senior pastor within Guilford County, North Carolina, to help with homeless prevention, Dr. Kevin A. Williamson. Um, I am a proud volunteer of that organization in helping families and individuals go from homelessness to housing.
That's great.
Yes.
So we're trying to leverage the virtues of a virtual event platform, which is free to nonprofits. And so what we're doing with as Yacht.me is hosting the podcast, is giving guests an opportunity to nominate nonprofits for whom we can raise money while we're actually recording the podcast. So if you're watching this later, you can come and you can see the link in the chat. We haven't got Turning Point set up in Yacht.me, and that may change in between the time we're recording this and the time you come and see that. But there will be a link one way or another for you to make a donation to Turning Point 180, which is a homelessness prevention charity in North Carolina. The other virtue of being on this platform is, like all good events, there's a main event, which is now, which is what we're doing. And then afterwards, we go into mingle mode, which is where Maseta and I will circulate to with any guests who are happy to hang around and talk to us one-to-one once the podcast is complete. So if you are interested in looking at a virtual events platform for your nonprofit, remember that it is 100% free and lots of new features coming on stream all the time. So let's turn to the topic at hand. Tell us first, though, Maseta, a little bit about your consulting business and your background and what your experience is in nonprofits.
Sure. I have been in this world for so long. It seems like I was born in this world. For the past 20 plus years, I have been working within the nonprofit industry, specifically within the health and human services area. Um, Starting out at entry level, providing social work and case management to families and households in regards to housing and economic stability, to now all the way what I do within my company called MDM Global Consulting, in providing a full, comprehensive nonprofit service from filing to program design to fund development strategy, just the works in ensuring that nonprofits are equipped. They have essential capacity and resources, and a full, clear, and concise plan for the achievement of their mission and their success. And I've been doing this. I started part time in 2013 and entered full time into it in 2019 in working with nonprofits from not just within the US, but also overseas as well. So, along with that, and ensuring that they are just equipped because they are the heart of each and every community. They are the front line and front stage support within the community that helps undergird and takes care of our families. And I just, as someone who worked within a nonprofit, my mission and my purpose is to make sure that every nonprofit is equipped with resources, because that's the best way that you'll be able to reach your mission.
That's great. Thanks for that comprehensive overview. Do
Mhm.
you specialize in health and human service nonprofits, or do you work across the board?
I do work across the board. However, I do give priority to, I call it a seven-tier level of those that are achieving in these focus areas of ending poverty, which is hunger and homelessness, education, um, healthcare, both medical and mental health,
Hmm.
employment and income-based nonprofits. Yeah, so those are priority, but I also work with civic organizations, community governments, who have mission-driven social enterprises that they want to roll out within their area.
And do you said you work abroad? What other countries besides the U.S. have you worked in?
Sure. I have worked with a social enterprise in Tanzania, Arusha, Tanzania, as well as, I cannot pronounce it, Burundi. Um, and of
Yeah.
course, I'm actually from Liberia. So we are doing some startup, uh, this is an exclusive startup stuff within the country of where I was born and lived for 8 years, and with a focus of community and housing development. So those are the three areas. And I also did pro bono work through London with Bridges for Enterprises for a few nonprofit organizations.
Right, over in the UK where I am. Well,
Yeah.
that's great. So we have a lot of very sort of similar experience in
Hmm.
particularly in the community health and human services uh, background. So confirm for me then where people can find you online. I know you mentioned a website, so if you could
Yeah.
tell us that address and then that what sort of social media platforms you like to use and spend time on.
Absolutely. Well, we definitely have a very robust website that lists our services as well as our annual conference we have every year and our MDM nonprofit academy. And everyone may find that at www.mdmglobalconsulting.com. We are on the social media platforms of Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram uh, under the same name of MDM Global Consulting. And then I also have a personal platform on LinkedIn that promotes the nonprofit consulting company that you can be directed to as well.
Okay, so
Mhm.
easy to find you then.
Easy to find.
That's what we like.
Hmm.
Okay, so let's dig into this topic. When you and I spoke a few weeks ago, I think it was a few weeks ago, could have been longer than that, trying to narrow down what we could talk about for about
So
40
much.
minutes. And it was a challenge, wasn't it? We were thinking, oh, we
Hmm.
could go in so many different directions. And just listening to you talk about your background, I could have jumped in at any point and go, wow, all of you about housing and education and poverty and employment and so on. And obviously health and mental health are all things dear to my heart. However, we decided that you had a particular issue around nonprofit culture, and the culture around nonprofit strategy and strategic
Hmm.
planning, and have observed situations where that culture can actually undermine rather than support an
Hmm.
organization's financial security. And it really piqued my interest, and I thought it's a fascinating angle on strategic planning, which I think everyone has had to make some adjustments to in the last 18 months.
Hmm.
But can you sort of give us an entry point, a way into this conversation around strategic planning and the culture of nonprofit strategy and how you see it before we get into the relationship to financial security?
Sure. Starting um, when I started in nonprofit, strategic planning was sitting around the table and everyone just throwing ideas and you capturing it in the meeting minutes. And then there you go, that's your plan. and,
I've certainly seen
and
a few like that. Yeah.
right, and whoever grabs a hold of to it for execution, right? Then it slowly evolved a little bit to this uh, uh, I would call it mammoth of where of nonprofits hire outside consultants. They come in, they do a retreat with the board. They may do a team retreat with the management staff and executive team. Could be a half a day, all the way up to a 3 day retreat. They develop this wide, comprehensive plan, just with all of these different segmentations of tasks and deliverables and due dates and deadlines. And then after,
And
and
don't forget the
everyone's
Post-it notes.
in the
Post-it notes,
post-it
lots of
notes,
Post-it notes,
lots of post-it
highlighter
notes,
pens.
all that thing, and all of these discussions, and everyone's feeling energized and great. And then it sits on the shelf. And it's not executed because of the fact that what a lot of nonprofits do is they overtask their staff and they developed a strategic plan, but they still have the same staff that have other roles and responsibility and can't project manage to move it through. And sometimes it sits on the shelf, or it's not really it's poorly executed, that they do not eventually reach their goal. For one example, I will use is here in the US, the federal government, they task any nonprofit receiving federal funds to say, you have to develop a 10-year plan to end homelessness. If you are receiving federal funds, you have to do that. So everyone was hired to try to develop these plans, these big old elaborate 100-page plans for these nonprofits and these communities, organizations. And these 10
Mm.
years plans have come and went, and where we are still at the point where it's an issue because of the fact that although the plan was developed, the other side of it, there was not an infrastructure set up in place for someone to project manage and push that plan, move that needle along, provide the quarterly evaluations, step in and ensuring that tasks are being met, benchmarks are being met, everyone is being kept up to date as to where the progress is. And that's kind of the misalignment when those things happen and become disjointed.
So it's worse than, or it's not as simple as, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Yeah.
You can plan and fail anyway,
Hmm.
because you're planning. It sort of, it sounds, the way you've described it, either misaligned or inappropriate, or unbalanced with regard to the resources of an organization to execute on the plan. The way you described in the first case, they've got the same staff who've got their day jobs. It sounds like the strategic plan was entirely additive,
Hmm.
all new stuff, but
Hmm.
not jettisoning any of the old stuff,
Hmm.
which makes it impossible. So these are, I think, very familiar issues with strategic planning. Have
Hmm.
you found that the pressures of COVID and other demands over the last sort of 12 to 18 months have altered strategic planning, or the way organizations are looking at strategic planning?
Well, that's why that's such a great question. And I would hope that you, myself, and other consultants, when they're posed this question, would be able to say yes, hopefully so, because of the fact that, and what would have happened if a lot of strategic plan would have had something, I mean, not specifically terming it pandemic plan, alternative plan, but
Right.
but something to this magnitude of, if something shuts down, what do we do for working remotely? What would have happened if a lot of nonprofits had those type of plans already developed? And when we went in on March in 2020, they would have been able to pull it out and just dust up their sleeve and full out going for execution. And so I hope that now that we have been in this cycle for over a year, a little bit over a year, that answer is yes. That it has triggered something um, deeply within all management or executive staff to say, we have to um, do things differently. And when we plan, we plan with a full lens. We plan for where we are now, where we are headed, and perhaps we plan if there is an alternative disaster recovery or something like that. We have that also within our plans as well, and we have an infrastructure to execute, execute. Not
Yeah,
plan
we'll get to that.
strategic. Yeah, strategic plan is not just a checklist, right? You just check it off your to-do list and okay, we've got it. Here you have it, board of directors. Here you have it, management's task, staff, and that's it. It's
Yeah.
you're doing it for execution. You're intentional about it.
Yes, that yeah, I think the execution, the proof of the plan is in its execution.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but I think what I've seen is very few nonprofits in the last 12 months had anything resembling an emergency preparedness plan. I mean, I just don't think it's commonplace in our sector, and
Mm-mm.
that goes to foundations and grant makers as well. Having said that, a lot of people try to fill the void with business
Ooh,
continuity planning, and have shortened their planning horizon so that I hear some people saying that strategic planning will be entirely different, but yet I know that there's a large number of organizations and boards that have been sort of waiting this out
mhm,
to see when it can return to normal, or even a next normal that's not actually too different from the old normal,
mhm.
which means we can dust off the plans we had in 2019 and early 2020 and refresh them somehow for 2022 and then carry on as before. But
Yeah.
that's a dangerous thought, really.
It is a dangerous thought. I was watching the news, and I saw a baseball game. I think it was in Texas, the Houston Astros, and they just went ahead and did it, and had 40,000 people in a stadium for for the opener of their baseball game, because to your point, they're ready to get back to their next normal. The challenge is we don't know what that is yet. We don't know. We are kind of like in this, there's a toy, this teeter totter that is on the playground.
Mm,
Just when we think we're doing okay, we get news of, oh, there's another variant strain. And, so we, as nonprofits, you don't know. Then that means, how do we still engage with our clients? Do we still continue to fundraise virtually? How do we meet with our key stakeholders for community buy-in? All of those nuances that when we are gathered at the table with key staff and board members to be able to have a strategy, the fact of the unknown, which is still kind of hovering above us, kind of puts us in this place of a pause place, because you want to strategize, but you just don't know to what extent. So, would it be helpful if you have a two-part plan? Sometimes people have, a plan A and they have a plan B. We've
yeah,
always just focused on, we're just always plan A, and oh no, there's never plan B or even a plan C. You know,
yeah.
um, there's never we don't go do a deep dive as nonprofits into those lenses, and I think that's why the culture shift has to change.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly right. I've seen a few organizations. In fact, one organization I know has a 10-year strategic plan that includes business continuity and what you might consider emergency preparedness. And I know that executive director told me not too long ago that that they have sort of shifted the balance
Mhm.
from business continuity being part of the strategic plan to the strategic plan being part of the business continuity.
Mhm.
And their, as I said, their horizon is now more like 12 months
Mhm.
rather than 3 to 5 years. And they're
Who
looking at
knows where we'll
scenario
be
A,
in 10
scenario
years?
B, scenario C,
Yeah.
because and I think this is sort of gets to the heart of what strategic planning is for. Your
Yeah.
that word you used, uncertainty. Is there not a role for the strategic plan in managing the
Mhm.
future, in managing the
Mhm.
uncertainty? Isn't that part of why we do it?
Mhm.
Or do we, are there other reasons, like we have to do a strategic plan because someone told us to, or because it's expected,
Yeah.
or we have to grow, and so we have to explain how we're going to do that. And
Yeah.
I think there's a number of things that we're pulling out of here around strategic planning culture that actually don't make a whole lot of sense.
It doesn't, and I think you're exactly right in the fact that we have to change this culture, because sometimes, just like a lot of nonprofits in the here in the U.S. with their staple recurring programs, those program guidelines were based on policies and procedures in a society that took place years ago. And so you don't want to make these long-term 10-year plans when society as we know it changes all the time. And so then now you're fostering and you're riding the wave on a plan that doesn't match the society and the community that you live in. And then when you're in your process of executing, when you finally try to or attempt to, you're wondering about the misalignment, you're wondering about the lack of your performance outcome, why you're not reaching your goals. Your technology structure is not in alignment with what you're trying to reach because based on what you're written, all of that, it's just disjointed because you've looked 10 years. 10 years ago, strategic plan was good to create for 10-year, a 5-year, 10-year, or a 3-year. But because we are so technological events advanced, we're going to the moon for goodness sakes, as regular people and things change it so fast. You don't want to have something that's 10 years because something our process within a year could change, and then now that 10-year plan is really kind of null and void and it's old. So I think kind of like with how within the business development culture and how they shifted from a full out, you know 50-page business plan you had to have. Now they're doing lean business plans, and if you
Hmm.
are heavily investing in for financing and everything like that, yeah, you will need a more in depth. But for your compass guide and your day to day delivery, you want something lean that can be amended, adjusted based on where you are within your organization and where you are within your immediate environment and what you're connected to. That's
Yeah,
kind of, I think, the culture shift that needs to be,
I
started.
think everyone is all for leaner, tighter, easier, just to consume it, just
Yeah.
to understanding is one of the soft metrics or tests I used to run with strategic planning is the extent to which the not just the senior staff but their direct reports
Mhm.
could articulate the main components of the strategic plan in their own
Mhm.
words.
Mhm.
And and if they couldn't, then they hadn't absorbed it. They
Yeah.
couldn't really describe it, and therefore it wasn't a living document. And as you said, it was going to end up on the shelf.
Yeah.
So I think the leaner is always better, but it does force us to think again what strategic planning is actually for.
Mhm. What is it for? When individuals act like, why do we need it? Why do we need time? Why do we need staff? Why do we need to pull away from what we're doing to focus on this? Because everyone needs a vision. Everyone needs a compass guide. You should have a reference point that you can always go back to when you're talking in terms of your programs, your staff design, your overall mission, the culture of your organization, so that you can keep on the original path of the starting mission of why that nonprofit was established in the first place. Within my 20 years, I have watched great successes, but then I've also watched nonprofits sometimes when they get in trouble because they're chasing the dollars and they stray away from their mission and they
Hmm.
stray away from what their program is supposed to be, and they stray away from their immediate deliverables because they're chasing the funding. And I've actually been employed in organizations that went that route because of what was funded, what funding was available, and had to learn the hard way to let it go and go back to the originality concept of why that nonprofit was started in the first place. And I think in those experiences, that's why I would strongly encourage. That's why a strategic plan is so important because it helps keeps you focused. It helps keep you balanced. If You have an infrastructure built within that somebody always has their eye and their pulse on it to insert it in your weekly meetings or your monthly managerial meetings or your monthly or bi-month quarterly board meetings. That always is the anchor in keeping the organization, the board members, and the executive team on that straight path of this is the original intent of the nonprofit and we will not stray from it. That's why I think a strategic plan, whether a full or a lean, it's really a necessity with a proper infrastructure built in internally within within the organization.
Okay, let's talk about that. It sounds like you're describing it really as a map. You can't go on this nonprofit journey without some idea of how you're going to reach your destination,
Hmm.
and obviously what's immediately in front of you is in greater detail than what's later
Hmm.
on. But you fill it in as you get there.
Hmm.
But what you're not going to do is go take these sharp left or right turns simply because there's a theme park
Yeah.
sign posted on the road that says turn
Yeah.
left here, and you know,
Hmm.
um,
Or
because
you see shiny or pretty colors, you're like, oh, let's go over there.
yeah,
No,
let's
no.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's an adventure enough just staying on the
Hmm.
road.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So I think when we're talking about infrastructure, I know you've mentioned this a couple of times. So let's dig in there because I think this is where we're getting to your point about how some of these uh, cultural behaviors around strategic planning can undermine financial security. So
Mhm.
am I right that this is really around whether you have the appropriate or adequate level of infrastructure to execute on the plan?
Exactly. And when you're looking at infrastructure, you need to look at all lenses. When you have a plan, you need to look at the funding infrastructure, the people management infrastructure, the supplies and material infrastructure, the technology infrastructure, even on the external, your partnership and your community buy in infrastructure. And what does that look like? All of those kind of tie in being able to have a fully I would say supportive net that you can utilize to really execute your plan on the front end and for the longevity of however that designated duration, whether it's a 1 year, a 12 months, or a 3 year plan.
So I think if I could use some different language here, in a sense, uh, there's no good having a plan, however lean or extensive or whatever far into the future, if it just doesn't seem realistic. And it doesn't mean that you can't be ambitious. Of course, as nonprofits, we are sort of by nature and optimistic, but you have to have some um, you have to de-risk it in a way. You have to know that the approach will be well received, at least eventually,
Hmm.
in your community, that your staff can actually execute on those program developments, that you'll be able to generate the funding required for what those plans are.
Yeah, you're exactly right. One of the strategies that I kind of like to integrate when you are facilitating these strategic planning sessions is to kind of incorporate how for-profits or large corporations, how they go about in mitigating their action items for their business, and kind of take those best practice and integrate it within a nonprofit operational process, right? So that your strategic plan becomes less of a wish list and more of a tangible action items that
Yeah.
that everybody at the table can fully buy into, and they can fully see themselves in the space that they can execute and run with it. I think sometimes, with the old nonprofit world, get so focused on the heart and the qualitativeness of the story of a nonprofit that we kind of negate the actual factual points, the data, the impact, and the scaling of what we're trying to do and using that to drive our actions. We're so focused on the heart of the mission that we forget to focus on the quantitative part of the mission, which needs to be a driving force in our actions. And I think in the conversation is to merge those together and try and to help encourage other nonprofit leaders that this is also an important factor that you cannot eliminate from your process when you are going in this route.
Yeah, you've got to adopt uh, the sort of discipline that
Hmm.
will lead to results. I mean,
Hmm.
ultimately, I'm with you here 100% on the idea of nonprofits. Is any just it's an organization that has to function and has to deliver.
Hmm.
And actually, we're trying to do hard things,
Yeah.
uh, through social impact, and so we have to
Hmm.
work that much harder and be that much more diligent and work against that part of the culture, I think, within nonprofits, but certainly surrounding nonprofits in some communities, in some circles, among some boards, is that, oh, it's the nonprofit sector. It's sort of optional. It's sort of unrealistic. It's sort of touchy feely, and isn't it nice, sort of thing. And to me, it's always been exactly the opposite on the ground. I mean, it's
Hmm.
never felt like that when you're doing this work,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know. And so you
Ask the
do have to
social
really
worker.
be legit. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's hard work, and so you
Yeah.
need to have those sorts of those sorts of disciplines.
Yeah, and to your point, you're exactly right in the fact of what you said regarding quantitative versus qualitative reports and measurements. Corporations and funders have shifted now because before, and I'm from Liberia, and when I came to America, I remember seeing on these TV commercials you know where I'm going, these villages, and they're showing these kids, and feed the children by donating here and, gonna tug at your heartstrings. But they don't tell you where that money, the percentage of the money that I'm giving to you, I need you to splice that out for me. Where is it all going to?
Right.
So that was then. Now corporations, especially high-end corporations, Fortune 100 corporations, they want to see impact. No more is it just, um, you know, we all know that there are disparities. We all know that there's poverty. We all know that there's lack in communities all over the world. Now, the organizations and these funders who can provide these big partnership and financial contributions. If you're going for 500,000, if you're going for 1 million, I was involved in a grant application for $100 million, and in order to do that, you had to show scale. There is no way a
Right.
foundation will give you $100 million for a 3-year project and you don't show scale, you don't show the impact, and you don't incorporate how they will also be a part of promoting their brand and providing an incentive for them to become a partnership. And I think within when nonprofits are developing these strategies and they're incorporating and they're shifting and focusing on their fund development strategy, which is a part of their overall strategic plan, they have to be very intentional about incorporating corporate, that Fortune 100 corporate processes and ensuring that there's longevity within their funding strategy. There's a diversity within their portfolio. There's an investment within marketing to help show that their organization is impactful and can make an impact. I'll give you an example. Locally here where I'm based, I don't know if you heard what's her Mackenzie Bezos, Jeff
Hmm.
Bezos, right? So just for Christmas, she gave a lot of nonprofits a wonderful gift, right?
Yeah.
$6 billion of distribution of funding. And do you know? And I studied that process because I wanted to learn how did they do that. They did it solely by several methods. They went on their website, they pulled up their IRS statements, And they checked out, that was the first 3 phase, they checked out all of their social media platforms to see what were their impact and what were their scale that these nonprofits were, doing within their region. And then out of that, then they reached out and said, okay, now we will contact this organization. Within North Carolina, within our community, we had 3 of those organizations that were a part of that was a recipient to be able to receive, $5 million just from that
Wow.
process. And not even um, and they didn't I was like, "How did they talk to y'all?" That they said, "No." That's the first thing. They just, they said they looked at our website, they looked at our tax statement, they looked at our social media, and the biggest thing was we were showing externally impact and
That they
scale.
could actually they had their act together and they knew what they were doing. And
Mhm.
it's funny that you say that because, this is a conversation I feel like I'm having with folks, all the time
Mhm.
about, your programming is your business. Your
Mhm.
programming has to get results. That's the point of your nonprofit. There really isn't any other reason to
Right.
exist.
Yeah.
And it amazes me. But one of the things I think what you're saying we're going to run up against very quickly is this time honored. It's not even really a debate, is it? That clearly the nonprofit sector wants a sufficient level of investment to run effective operations. You
Mhm.
can't constantly do short term annual funding on a shoestring and
Mm-mm.
expect to have the staff commitment and the longevity of your programs to for them to learn how to
Mhm.
be effective, because they're never
Yeah.
effective right out the gate.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. And I think, again, the shifting of the culture of how we provide nonprofit general operation has to change. Nonprofit executives have to have a corporate mindset. One of the biggest and best practice in corporation is a little company here in Cary, North Carolina called SAS, and I think the CEO is worth $4 or $5 billion. And his main thought is, my first investment are my people, my second investment is my marketing, and then it's the products. And because if I take care of internal resources, then my people will take care of our clients and our customers. And I think nonprofits sometimes they focus so much on the program mission, they forget to take care of their people. They forget to take care of their marketing and invest in their marketing internally so that they can have an external presence online and in their community, that then they can reach a broader range of individuals, corporations who may be looking for places to give, looking for corporate and social responsibilities, but because they have not invested in their marketing to put themselves in those people's presence, they're missing out on opportunity that's really out there. And that's why sometimes, these nonprofit strategies are really, really, we've really got to start doing something differently because we are undermining your financial security if you don't change your strategy, if you don't get outside of your comfort zone, if you don't stop doing what was done in the 1960s, because that's not the way of the world right now. We are a digital world, we are a virtual world, and that needs to be a part of a nonprofit investment and a part of the strategy and how to if anything COVID has taught us, how do we invest and how do we pivot and how do we change and how do we cover all angles
Well, how do we run nonprofits as businesses? I mean, they're
as
not.
business?
We don't take the money out and put it in our private hands.
Mm-mm.
But aside from that, they're businesses.
Yeah.
And I think there's to your point about spending time on programs instead of people. We're sort of adopted that from the sort of foundation and philanthropy approach, which is maximum proportion of money into programs,
Hmm.
and not people, and not becoming experts and advocates for the communities that we serve, for example, because that's not income generating, or it doesn't have the same sort of impact. And the challenge there, I think, is to this idea of getting out of the box, there are a lot of nonprofits, dare I say it, that have a sense of learned helplessness. That
Mhm.
they do a strategic plan that bakes in this idea that they're going to go cap in hand to philanthropists and grant makers and ask for money in a power relationship that undermines
Mhm.
their role as the social impact makers in their
Right.
communities. They're the
Right.
ones who are doing the work.
Right.
But often nonprofit leaders don't take that as a sign of strength. They
Yeah.
they they go to funders cap with sort of their cap in hand mentality or asking,
Yeah. Yeah.
which makes it difficult to have the confidence that I think is necessary to execute a strategic plan in the way that you've described.
Yeah, and you're exactly right in the fact of even with the nonprofit leaders, that they also have to shift in how they do things and being able to think outside the box, because they need to be able to hone in on a specific area of focus, which is, I believe, your external public relations, building that relationship, and then internally cultivating your your management team, and then depending on the size of your organization, allowing your management team to reach the better part of your people. Because if your organization is 60 or 70 people, you're not going to tangibly be able to reach everybody on a monthly basis. So you need to cultivate, help develop those who are in your immediate circumference, your executive team, and then allow them to take your words, your mission, the mission of the nonprofit, and disseminate it to the other teams and divisions within your organization. I think, that do it all mentality really has
Oh,
to shift,
yeah, yeah,
and just we like there's just so many just stop, just
right.
really, you don't have to do it all. There's
You
even if you
can't.
don't you can't.
You can't
That's
do it all. And
yeah.
and and I love what you're saying about the this attention to people in management, because even if you're not 60 or 70, if you've got a staff of 6 or 7, even I mean, people might say that's small, or that could be even someone's aspiration to have six
Mhm.
or seven people. If you're doing it right, you have still an army of volunteers around those people. You've got board members, you've
Yeah.
got committees, you've got lots and lots of other people that,
Mhm.
in a sense, are more difficult to manage
Mhm.
than an employee relationship,
Right.
because it's informal, it's seen as a volunteer basis, it's unpaid, and it's less structured with regard to time. So you
Yes.
don't have the same exposure to those people, but
Mhm.
yet you've got to extract the best out of them in accordance with the impact you're trying to create. And it's a challenge that not many founders really can appreciate until they're in the middle of it.
Exactly. And you are so right. When I was working in, I would give you one experience. It was a smaller nonprofit. I worked in large ones who control 15 counties, but this smaller one, which you would think would be a little bit more structured, that's, I've learned what to do and I learned a lot of what not to do. And one of those things of chasing the dollars and not the mission, right?
Hmm.
Another was not investing in your people because the leadership was so much invested in, oh, we're going to throw all the money into the programs, but your people needed the services that you were providing. So what do you think that does for
Yeah,
the morale of your
yeah,
employees,
yeah.
especially if you're demanding more work, you're wanting more hours, but you're not providing the resources, you're not taking care of them, you're not investing in them, then you're wondering why your program outcomes are not what they should be. Why isn't there a very kind of positive growth within your organization? And those are some of the things that, as nonprofit leaders, you just can't do. It doesn't make you less of a nonprofit. It doesn't make you less philanthropic. It doesn't make you less of a humanitarian if you invest in your people who are your front line and extended arms to do the work. Imagine if your brain, if your body, if we didn't eat, if you ate and your brain and your body didn't digest all of the nutrients to your other limbs and your what happens, right? When you drink and your body doesn't get the proper water that it needs. you get cramps, and it sometimes hurts to walk. So, that's the same thing within the
Great
structure
metaphor.
of a
Yeah.
nonprofit organization, right?
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
don't Yeah, if you don't give it the proper things that it needs, it's gonna get cramped and it's gonna stop the process of longevity, sustainability, and success. So as a strategy for leadership within nonprofit, you have to stop trying to do it all. Focus on your area of what you need to focus on, your people management within your immediate team, your external relation and building community buy-in, and your board liaison, and allow and trust the genius and the talents and the skills of those who you call to the table, and allow them the free reign to do what you hire them to do.
Right. Yeah. That's it seems like we could have a whole other discussion
Yeah,
on people. I think that's definitely a topic for another time. I want to say thank you to. See, we've had a wonderful conversation about nonprofit strategic planning and the culture around it, and whether it actually helps or undermines what it is that you
financial.
do, that you're trying to achieve. Can you remind everyone who's watching or listening where to find you online?
Yes.
And we'll wrap up the live portion of this episode.
Absolutely. Again, you can find me online on our website, www.mdmglobalconsulting.com, as well as all social media platforms of Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and my personal LinkedIn page of Maseta Dorley, and which provides all of the information regarding my company, MDM Global Consulting, which is a full comprehensive nonprofit development firm.
Well, thank you so much for spending today with me. For those of you listening on the podcast, if you can leave a review, that always makes it easier for other nonprofits to benefit from the information we're trying to share. And I'd like to thank my sponsors, YapMe, this virtual events platform, and PodPro Audio that makes professional podcasting easy. And that will draw to a close our live portion and move into the mingle mode virtues of this platform and speak to those who want to stick around and have another word with us. We'll see you next Wednesday at 11 Eastern. And I'll be speaking to Tamsin Astor, PhD, about good habits and bad habits. I'll see you then.